Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a gathering place for our third Sunday Politics Talk. We got a lot to talk about today, and we got the gang is going to be all here. Um, we are all running in from different places and doing things, so it's always good to get together every third Sunday and just talk politics and what's current events. You know, when you were in school, it was called probably current events. We're going to talk about that too right after this opening.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard and they're moving on something.
Branding is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question.
Hey everyone, we're back and the gang is all here. So let's just go ahead and bring everybody in and get rolling with our third Sunday Politics Talks. Because let me tell you, we really are rolling today, right on in here. We haven't seen him in a while, but you know, we are always happy to bring him in because he's like a busy guy. But Mr. Jamarr Brown.
Hey, Carolyn. Hey, everybody. How are you doing?
We're all doing good. Thank you for asking, Jamarr. It's good to see you. You are a busy guy these days. So we're always happy. I'm always happy to spend some time with you. You know, this is we schedule this and this is how we catch up. So
right.
Before and after. And look, Jamarr, I'm serious about us rolling in because I'm gonna bring Brandon in because he is literally sitting in his car rolling right on
in. What's up, y'all? How you doing?
He literally is sitting in the car. He's always in the car.
You know, we're always burning up these streets in the community.
That's right.
I know that's right.
That's right. I think today all of us were like Zoom, hop in the seat and just turn it on. So very good. Good to have everybody here. Good to see you, Brandon. I know you're always rolling. Well, we all are. But let's go ahead and roll right into our topics. And you know, the topics that are front of mind for everyone is the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and the results of that. And we're starting to go into the closing arguments with the trial of the gentlemen who have been allegedly murdered, Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, and what we anticipate will go with that. And then also Mr. Julius Jones, who I believe was in Oklahoma. His sentence, death sentence, was commuted from death to life without parole, but there's still issues with that because supposedly he's innocent and been in prison for 20 years. So it is a win, but the journey, as his family has been quoted, has not finished. So let's start with Rittenhouse, guys. It is you know, how do you feel about it? Let me ask you this. How do you feel about it, Jamarr?
Well, I'll kick us off. You know, to be quite honest, I mean, I think I feel like most people, you know, that we've seen probably in social media or had conversations, you know, you're not surprised. We see the system, you know, people are like, the system is broken. Quite frankly, I don't think the system is broken. I think the system was designed to do just this. We see a system that reinforces that, you know, white people can use their privilege, one, to cause harm in communities, but also two, to as a defense mechanism, you know, as well. And so the system was built to do this. And so the system is doing that. And we have to really gut our system in a lot of ways, really to get rid of the racial foundation that our criminal justice system, our political system was built on. And so for me, you know, I'm not surprised or terrified, but this means that we still have work to do. And then the other piece that I'll share, I think that's important because I also want us to get to a place of taking action, right, is that most judges are elected. I know in Texas, judges are elected. I think Wisconsin, if I recall correctly, judges are elected. A lot of places, judges are elected. And so we need to be making sure that we're paying attention to who's running and what is their judicial philosophy, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and what that means for the criminal justice system. Because a lot of that gentleman, the judge was elected, right? And so a lot of these judges, they need to go, but we've got to organize our communities to be able to do that. Now, I think that there are a couple barriers to this judicial piece that we have to acknowledge is, at least in Texas, for example, the voters just passed a constitutional amendment to update our amendment to increase the number of years that you have to be licensed as an attorney before you can run for judge. And so that creates barriers sometimes for women, younger lawyers, people of color, et cetera, who, have not been able to build that experience to serve in our courts right now. And so we're seeing on the other end of judicial selection how they, every time we achieve something or work to achieve something, the goal moves, right? Yeah. And so I think that that's a critical thing that we've got to look at is who are these judges? How are they on there? And how do we understand the system better to get judges that are going to rule with fairness and under the law?
I don't think in South Carolina we elect our judges, but we elect the legislators who
select the judges.
Who select the judges, and that's problematic of itself. And I just want to say this quickly. Then I want Brandon to make his remarks also. That then the Post and Courier, they have a big article about the lack of ethics in South Carolina. I mean, basically, the system has been created to be corrupted regarding ethics. So that is in and of itself problematic, and it's something that we've probably known for years in one form or another. But the Post and Courier today's one of the big articles today is about our ethics system when it comes to the legislature. I always believe that our 1896 Constitution, which was created to disenfranchise the Black male vote, that means that the root of the Constitution is rotten and it's only been amended since then. So really you're amending something that's rotten at the core. So we may need to have a constitutional convention to address that. But Brandon, what are your thoughts regarding the Rittenhouse? I do agree with Jamarr, but what are your thoughts, Brandon?
Yeah, I agree with what Jamarr's statement was, that this ruling that came through in this trial gave other self-appointed vigilantes, a green light to target, Black folks across America and their allies, right? There weren't people of color murdered by Rittenhouse, but they were sympathizers and allies who were murdered, which is a bullhorn statement saying, if you betray us, we're going to kill you like we killed them. And I believe that instead of justice being served, the only thing that was served a couple days ago was privilege. And we have to uproot this. It makes me think of something that a candidate for governor in South Carolina campaigned on, and that was Phil Noble. He campaigned on uprooting the corruption in South Carolina, which is very prevalent in our judicial system, where our state legislators, they select these judges, and then these judges feel obligated to make sure that they throw enough cases in the judiciary favor, because nearly 90% of our elected officials in our state house are lawyers, so that they can be selected to serve on the bench again. And Phil Noble called that plantation politics. I think that we have to really further define the ripples and the deeply rooted systems that rely on that system of plantation politics today, so that we can identify how to uproot it, eliminate it, and then fix the system that was flawed from the very beginning.
And it goes back to the Constitution and what's written in our state Constitution. And just to give the people an idea of this plantation system that Brandon cited Phil Noble is speaking towards, is imagine the legislature are the people who appoint the judges, and most of those legislators who are lawyers appear in front of those judges to argue cases. So it's the system itself is created for corruption, because one hand is going to wash the other. One of the things I also want to say regarding Rittenhouse and Arbery, they're actually two sides of the coin of white supremacy. they're willing, the Rittenhouse case has shown, and this is historical, it's not the first time this has happened, that white supremacy is actually willing to kill white people to maintain the system. I believe in the Arbery case, they're actually going to be found guilty because, once again, they're willing to throw certain white people under the bus so they can step back and say, hey, we're not racist. Look, these white people got convicted. That in and of itself is actually killing white people to maintain that system of white supremacy. So this is when we talk about systemic institutionalized racism. This is what we're talking about. The systems are racist. So you have to root out the systems if we want to really address racism in this country. Jamar, I see you shaking your head. I know you got something to say.
Well, I think the thing about white supremacy also too, as it relates to white people, white supremacy works against lower class white people, lower class uneducated white people, and
low income white people. Yeah.
And what you're seeing, like you're saying, if they're convicted, I want to see what the sentence is. Because all of that speaks together, right?
Yes.
Because conviction is one thing. A sentence that breeds real accountability for actions is another. And I think that because we have to understand the criminal justice system, there's 20 steps, right? In the system really to try a case, prosecute a case, bring charge, all those different things. And so I think we've also got to talk about this other side of white supremacy too, is that white people also suffer from white supremacy, but you find because they're white, they still try to maintain that system, even though it may not benefit them, as we may, see in the Arbery case. So I just wanted to add that to what you're saying.
And that's a very good point, Jamar. I agree. I'm glad you brought that up. Brandon, I saw you shaking your heads also, so you got something to say about that. Go ahead and
Yeah, I was just saying that this wasn't the first time we've seen white supremacists kill white allies of the Black justice, Black empowerment, the Black liberation movement, right? We've seen it in the Freedom Summer when members who got on the bus to help register Black folks in the South, they were killed. We saw it even before that when we had on the Confederacy, anyone who from the South that took the side of the Union, not only were they killed, but members of their family were killed and lynched as well. This is a age-old habit, and I heard someone say when the Ku Klux Klan came and burnt a cross on the front yard of Black folks and white folks in America, it wasn't to keep themselves warm. It wasn't, a ritual of honor. It was to
anyone who could see the flame or the light from that cross to give them a very stark warning that if they were crossed them, they were next. And this is what terrorism looks like. It is to strike fear in the hearts and the minds of people, to handicap them and assert dominance over someone with that torturous fear. And that's what we're seeing our judicial system in this ruling support and also amplify. Now, on my timeline, since the Rittenhouse verdict, and even before then, I've seen friends, people that I consider friends, still consider some of them friends to this day, but one of them said, "Hey, champion," I'm quoting now since my kids are out the car, they said, "Fuck around and find out," right? Now, what does that mean? And you are posting a picture of Rittenhouse with his assault rifle across his chest, and then posting up photos of yourself with your handguns and your assault rifles. What are we going to find out, right? And behind these actions are fearful bullies. Fearful bullies. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of what we or the groups of folks who are fighting for equity and equal justice and power in the political power in this country. They're afraid of what we could attain, and they're afraid of what they could lose, their supremacy. And they're bullies because I remember, and I'll share this quick story, and then I'll let y'all talk. But I was in the 6th grade, and a good friend of mine, Robbie Q, he was very short all throughout middle school, shorter than everyone else. And it was this one big bully who was bigger than all of us. He was probably the tallest and biggest guy in our class, shoving both myself and Robbie. And then for some reason I said, well, let's take this to the bathroom. I don't know why we fought in the bathroom at our young ages. Anyway, he got in the bathroom.
You lost your mind.
Got in the bathroom. For some reason, I took my badge off like that was going to do anything. But then I slapped the fire out of him. And as soon as I connected with his face, he cried like a baby and ran and told the principal. Now, this is who these people are. They're big, they're bold until you slap them in the face. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, if we don't use our power at the polls as a collective voice to slap these bullies in the face, to unseat them, to elect other folks who will fight for us, we are going to continue to be victimized by weak-minded, intellectually crippled bullies. And that's all I have to say.
And I'm glad you brought that point up, Brandon. That is so important to note, that these people are operating from a foundation of fear. They are afraid of what's going to happen when the minorities become the majority. They're afraid that once the minorities are in control of governments, local, state, federal, and that's going to take some time, but locally, state, it's going to happen faster than people believe if we vote and get engaged. They're afraid of revenge, that we're going to seek revenge. Never mind the fact that we probably could have had revenge many times, and the history doesn't show we've taken revenge. They come from a place of fear, and we have to understand that, because we have to understand that gives us power. That empowers us when you understand where they're coming from. And then, Jamarr, I also want to note what you said about sentencing. That shows up not only in a Rittenhouse verdict or Arbery, whatever happens with that case, but also the January 6th insurrection. You can see the sentencing. It is happening in real time with these folks getting 24 months, 3 years, months for an insurrection. People have got to understand the seriousness of what they did January 6th. They did an insurrection to overthrow our Democratic Republic government, and they're getting slaps on the hand because of who did the insurrection. Just as in Rittenhouse, if that was a black 17-year-old boy, he wouldn't have made it off the street. They would have slaughtered him. If we did an insurrection, there would have been blood in the streets. And that's there would not have been a trial. But so it starts at the very beginning with whatever drives them to take up their weapons, but it also starts in how our system handles them. Our justice system arrests them or does not arrest them. It starts at that moment, and then it goes through the court system. So, Jamarr, you are very right that we need to pay attention to the sentencing. Go ahead.
Yeah, and let's even with the insurrection and the hatred and the fear and all, what y'all discussed, let's take it another step further. And another step is, let's talk about how white people who are still in power right now are passing laws that are in our books, that are in our institutions, that protect them, one, but two, expand their access to the very weapons that they use, whether it's to pillage in the street, whether it's to shoot down protesters, whether it's to do an insurrection, whatever the case might be, gun down someone running down the road. Let's talk about like Texas, for example, where this legislative session, they passed permitless carry, that if you're 21 and over, you don't need a permit to carry. That's no background check, no training. whatsoever. And so literally now they have opened the floodgates that people who are seeking to cause harm will have access to weapons that we use in war, and they will use those same weapons to slaughter communities to get their way and to maintain power. And so we've got to talk about, before you get to the criminal justice system, they already built the law to protect them. So when they have to go through the criminal justice system, they're protected. And that's why these people are getting 6 months in jail, a year probation, 2 years, you know, and in most states, you don't even have to serve the whole time, right? Or some federal mandates, you don't even have to serve. You serve 80% of the time or whatever. So whatever they're getting sentenced, they don't even have to serve the whole thing. But we're literally opening the floodgates, especially in these southern states, to just hand them the weapons. And then now we can't sit back and say, well, let's put them under the jail. Well, you can't really put people under the jail if you've given them access and you've given them a green light and you've given them permission. And so I think you've got to talk about that and how, if, you know, like you were saying earlier, Marilyn, when we do take over governments, it's very hard to undo law. It's not like we just take over and the laws are undone. I mean, it still takes decades to undo the laws and the impacts that we will see in our society with those laws, right? Because I could go run for the legislature now, and we could pass a bill that repeals some bad thing, but the impact still happen. And how do you reverse that in different agencies with different employees, with different levels of government? And so I think that those things are important that we have to acknowledge, and how the laws feed into how they're getting slaps on the wrist, because a lot of the laws leave a lot of loopholes or give them a lot of access to use their privilege.
And you know,
go ahead, Brandon.
What Jamarr just said made me think about the race in Columbia, South Carolina, where Tamika Isaac Devine was running against Daniel Rickerman. And Daniel Rickerman basically said he had a black folks, what do you have to lose, Donald Trump moment during their campaign. And he said, black folks, basically black leaders have been running this city for X amount of years, and black people are still suffering, right? And Tamika's response was what Jamarr just said. You don't understand how much time it takes to undo the results and the infection of a institutional racism and institutionally biased systems, even if you have a majority on the city council, because you don't have a majority at the state house, you don't have a majority at the federal level, right? And even now we're seeing where, when it comes to issues that are specifically I would say unique, as a lack of a better term, for black and brown folks, that even our white Democrats are not willing to 100% jump behind those issues to solve them, right? I even saw going to my timeline, because that's the only piece of reality we have these days, is your timeline on social media. But this young guy who shares my first name, Brandon Peele, he's from Winsboro, South Carolina, was going to run for mayor and was one of our biggest allies, showing up to everything, getting ready to run for mayor. I talked to him about supporting his race. And then after he was not able to run for mayor, or not successful in his bid for mayor, now he is the biggest sympathizer for the insurrectionists from January 6th. He's the biggest sympathizer online for Kyle Rittenhouse. He is, right now, I'm getting notifications of him responding to something I said earlier on his timeline, because I'm shocked. I thought you were an ally. And it makes me think of the white wolf that Malcolm X talked about. And I know that's a dirty word, talking about Malcolm X, but we also have to support our allies. We also have to make sure that we have discernment when it comes to our allies, and our true allies need to check these fake ones that are just coming in to use us for whatever reason, and then get back to business as usual. And I see that in Brandon, And I definitely see it in Daniel I was about to call him Daniel Rittenhouse, but Daniel Rickerman, who won the mayor seat in Columbia, who had, black women, black folks waving his signs, paying them $12, $13 an hour. And then once he gets in there, I'm pretty sure those same people won't be able to get into the city hall. So that's all I had to say.
And that speaks not only to campaigns, but also you see that the ally for the moment when you have, I knew it was when we had a protest against the Pawleys Island mayor who said some very racial inflammatory remarks on Facebook. And this was more of it was still protest, but it wasn't quite political. But we did lead some protests against him, and a young, bright white woman came out and she was like, yeah, he's got to resign. And I said, we're not going to see her again, because she was someone who still relied on her family to provide food, clothing, and shelter. And sure enough, when we invited her back to other protest moments, she didn't show up. And what it was, I'm pretty sure, because I've been on this earth long enough, when you go back home and they tell you who paying your bills, who's giving you this lifestyle that you like, that takes a great amount of character and black backbone to fight against something like that. And I've seen it time and time again when you have, especially young white allies, when they're under threat of losing that lifestyle, they will disappear. And it's so much easier sometimes to even not only go back to that lifestyle, but to go further and embrace what we would look at and say, why would you support a white supremacist? Why would you support someone killing other people? Why would you support open carry when this escalates violent situations? Well, you got to understand where they're coming from. And you're right, Brandon, you have to use discernment and who you bring into your space, because I'm very about 0.1% sympathetic, but I'm because I understand where it's coming from, but it's not enough just to say I'm not racist. You have to be actively anti-racist, and that rolls into other stuff. Understanding the issues that African American communities face, but not only understanding them, but what are you going to proactively do to help correct those situations? And they take a long time. I was just in a meeting in my hometown this week, and I said in 2026, it is going to be 500 years that enslaved Africans first stepped into Georgetown, South Carolina in 1526. It's 500 years of institutionalized racism. 500 years of some type of form of government or organization that was created to suppress and oppress us. So the solutions are not going to come overnight. We have to have short-term victories with long-term results. And we've got to get that in our heads. And if we don't, we're going to continuously lose elections, because it's going to create apathy and people are just going to get frustrated. And then they tend to do what? Become disengaged. Go ahead, Jamarr. I can see that brain rolling through your eyes.
No, I'm really just, sitting and listening. And I definitely, not the white wolves. Sorry. But I agree with everything, that y'all have said. I think, we obviously have real work to do. The thing that I will just say that might be a little different than Brandon is, I'm not trying to be friends with racists. One of the things, Maya Angelou taught us, show me, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And so if I see those statuses, I believe you the first time. And so, at the end of the day, yes, we're doing, real work around educating and, doing all of that. And I think that's important. I don't do that because I don't have the patience to. but, I also think that if white people own most of society, they built if they manage the library system, then they can go figure it out. And that's just really my position. And I think that there are many white people who just choose not to. And so for me, it sounds great to say, yes, maybe you made a bad statement. That's still my friend, and that's fine. But I do think that there's a level of personal and self-accountability that has to happen that we don't see. And it's one thing for us to call people out or call people in. It's another thing for people to call themselves out and call them in. Because when you're talking about fear, you're talking about hatred, that's not something that I can just sit there and call out and it's going to change. It's got to be something that people are introspective about and really want to make a change. And then white people need to hold each other accountable. Because I've said, throughout all of this work around, Black Lives Matter, there are two things, right, that are important. Is number one, just because we say Black Lives Matter don't mean we're anti-white. So we need to start there. And then number two, we're not asking white people to be heroes and sheroes. We're asking you to do your part and stay out of the way of progress. But we're also saying when you see another person who looks like you operating in that way that pulls back progress, that pulls back our society, you need to step up and not depend on Black people to educate you about a system that people who look like you created. And so I think that, those are the things, that we've got to acknowledge. And, I don't know if it's my older age that I'm less patient. But, I think that, at the end of the day, it's some real work that the white folks have to do. And people of color, we can protest. Yes, we will run for office. Yes, we will vote. We will register people. We will do all the things that, we've talked about on this program. But there's some level of introspection that white people have to have, majority, minority, whatever. They've got to have that introspection, because when you talk about fear and hatred, if they're not held accountable, then those sorts of things continue.
That's right. And I agree with you on that, Jamarr. And let me tell you, age does play a part. And I'm older than Jamarr and Brandon, and I can tell you my patience level is like this. But I don't resort to violence. I just move on. I really do. And it's not just anti-racism, racism dealing with, but even within our own community and dealing with some of our solutions, it really starts, if you don't start the work as an individual inside, your households, your community will reflect what's inside of you, because you are part of the community. And I get impatient with people who are always meeting to meet, or they don't offer, they complain, they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And I'm a doer. I'm walking the walk, and I'll walk right on out that meeting and keep on going, because I just don't have time anymore. Go ahead, Jamarr.
The Bible says faith without works is dead. So while everybody's thumping the Bible, but trying to maintain their racism and white supremacy, but I'm Christian and I'm evangelical, the Bible says that we have to do the work, and that's all of us doing our part, and everybody has a different part to play. And so I think that those are the things that you have to acknowledge. There's a level of work that we've done as Black people to address issues, to bring things to the light, to really talk about this. But it is also, there's a level of introspection that white people have to want the system to change so that these things don't continue. And so, like you said, Marilyn, the patience is here. And I will believe the progress when I see the progress. And I think that it takes all of us to do it, but it can't just be because
on the backs of Black folks.
On the backs of Black folks. And like I told somebody the other day, we were talking about Black Lives Matter. Just because I'm for Black lives doesn't mean I'm against white people. And so I think that there's a lot of that piece. It's like, you can't be for this and you got to be against this, and you can be for both. And it doesn't have to always be either or. It can be and sometimes. But we have built our minds to say this or that. Then it becomes Black or white. And so I think that I support white people who run for office. I've endorsed white people who run for office. I've endorsed Black people. And just because I endorse Black people or Black movements doesn't mean I'm against white people or won't work with white people. And so I think that we've got to go from this either or all the time to an and, because that's how we really move forward in the system.
Exactly. Brandon?
Yeah. And, you had me thinking about the folks that still refer to as friends who make these dumb statements. And many of these guys are folks that I served in the United States Army with, right? And because of that, I can get them on the phone and have that courageous, corrective conversation with them, right? And some of what we're seeing is both Black folks and white folks not going directly to the source and having that courageous, corrective conversation with people to say, all right,
So what you just said, homeboy, is racist, and this is why. Now let's talk through this thing, and if we're still good on the other side of this, we're still good. If we're not, you're unfriended, blocked, and so on and so forth, right? But we can't see it and then blow up on it somewhere else and never talk to that person, especially if there's someone you're connected to or someone in similar allyship with. And I've had this situation multiple times. But then going back to this overall thing, and I've been working with the State House on redistricting, and what I've seen there connects to this whole Rittenhouse verdict and what I'm seeing now in this conversation. We know that America is about to become a majority Black and brown country. But that is not stopping these white male Republicans from seeking total domination at all cost. We see that in them drawing the lines, especially over in Texas. Have mercy. Here in South Carolina, have mercy. But we're also seeing it in how they stacked the courts under the Trump administration so that they can maintain dominance and control, even if they're in the minority.
An apartheid system.
An absolute apartheid system. So no matter what the will of the people is, the deck has already been stacked to favor them no matter what. And that's what we're seeing.
And I think we have to learn that we don't, sometimes doing the work is not seeking a big victory. Sometimes doing the work is showing up and speaking out and holding them accountable. I think the expectation is every time I show up, I need a victory. No, the victory is that you showed up. The victory is that you voted. The victory is that you got somebody representing that looks like you in some type of elected position or leadership position that they can influence what's going on. Like redistricting, sometimes it's just showing up. And you may not know what's going on, but you can listen and learn. And I think people get caught up in that, looking for a victory, and it creates that discontent and dissatisfaction. Then they don't show up anymore. What I have learned is my victory I'm not expecting to change the city council person who ran a dark money, dirty campaign attacking a Black minister or attacking, misquoting people or just outright lying, but I'm bringing it to their attention that I'm here to remind you and not let you sweep it under the rug, and that we're watching you and we're going to hold you accountable and transparent, because during your campaign, you planted a poisonous seed, which means everything you do as a city council member is going to be poisonous. That's the victory that I went to the city council meeting looking for, that somebody showed up to remind them what you did. In spite of the riches you may have spent, that doesn't mean that you have morals, character, or humility. And sometimes you got to bring it to them. That is why I don't lose sleep at night when I speak out, because the victory is showing up. The victory is in the vote. If you go there expecting to change people's heart, you will always come away disappointed. You need to show up so that you can start the work to put people in place to start the journey, the long journey of changing ordinances, changing state law and federal law. Because this is not just a national issue or state issue. They're working to take over local government, especially now that there's a lot of money flowing around. So we have to always be vigilant. That in and of itself, being vigilant, is a victory. Before I hand it off to Jamarr and Brandon again, I want to remind everybody that you're watching A Gathering Place, third Sunday Politics Talk. And y'all, it's all political, because when you work in politics, you got to have knowledge. You got to be informed so that you can be an effective, engaged citizen. Jamarr, what's going on in Texas? I want to change the subject a little bit because we've got about 13 minutes left, and Beto is running for governor. As Brandon said, redistricting is a hell of a thing in Texas.
It's done now.
I mean, it's all in your race in Texas, they not even playing. It's like, we don't care that you guys are increasing in numbers. We're going to go right over here and draw these lines and give us a majority, simply creating an apartheid system.
Yeah.
You know, in America, in our states and in America. Your thoughts. Update us, Jamarr. What's going on in Texas?
The question is, what's not going on? That's probably that's probably more the question. I mean, let's start with the redistricting. You know, over the past decade, 95% of the population growth were people of color. We were able to draw a new Asian district, a couple new districts, you know, across the state. But I mean, it's still not a clear representation, especially on the federal level. As well, because what we're seeing is, right, that Democrats are in control of Congress, but the Republicans hold the state legislature. And so they can draw the lines to make more districts so they can go back and win the House in 2022. That was what was at stake, for example, among many things, you know, in the 2020 census and also election. But that's done. We, you know, I mean, there's some things in court that, you know, we're waiting on a few areas. Beto is running. I think everyone has seen that across the country. We have also heard announcements from candidates up and down the statewide slate ticket. You know, one of the things that, you know, came out in the article the other day is how we must continue to work on diversity, but diversity in race, gender, class, and what that means for people to run for office. You know, Texas is a state, it's 254 counties. It's nearly 30 million people. It is a large state, you know, to do that. And so I know that work I'm committed to at the party to be able to do that. But the big piece that's going on for us right now is we are in our candidate filing periods. We have a 30-day filing period. So the candidates are filing for every office up and down the ballot, from governor on down to judges, justice of the peace, constable, sheriff, you name it. There are offices up and down the ballot. And then in a few months, about 6 months, we'll start filing for school boards. And we elect our community college boards are elected in Texas. And so, you know, we'll be preparing for those as well. And so we will have elections everywhere up and down the ballot. And so that is the work that we're doing. That's the work that we're preparing for. Because we know Texas has been the battleground for a lot of the Republican policies, whether it's immigration, whether it's fighting border communities, whether it's guns, and how they've expanded access to more weapons for people who probably don't need them, how they've restricted abortion to a 6-week ban here. But the big piece that we're navigating, and I think we're going to have to navigate in Southern states, is this critical race theory. Mm-hmm. It's giving people an excuse to pull information, and we're going to train another generation to not be able to think critically because all of the information is in front of them. And part of it is we have educated many generations because we skew our own history.
Yeah, we miseducation.
And then people get into business, people get into the classrooms, people get into the courtrooms, they get into the boardrooms, and the misinformation that goes through our school system is what's governing our society. And it is really dangerous. And so this critical race ban and how they're doing those things, the governor even came out a couple weeks ago and said to call an investigation into any textbooks that are in schools that might have pornography. The only things that I know that would potentially have pornography are sex ed books or British literature or Greek literature or something, you know, that we would take, you know, maybe in high school or college. And, you know, and at the end of the day, you have to remember if pornography was such a thing for them, you've been the governor for 8 years. And all of a sudden you run for re-election. Now you care about what's in the books. And so we've got to just be mindful of this critical race theory. We saw it in the Virginia race, and we're going to see it all over the country because what white people will do is if they're losing power, they will make sure that people in power don't have the information to think critically, to govern, and to rebuild, in a lot of cases, systems in our society. And so those are just a few things. I want to be mindful of time. We probably need a whole show for Texas just because.
We sure do.
And the voting rights stuff, I forgot to mention, you know, we're navigating those pieces, right? And so I think that those are things that, you know, we've got to be thinking about going into the election. It's not about just going to get people to the polls. It's about how do we find messaging that motivates people to understand the importance of showing up to the polls every single election, every single year, because we have to build the incremental wins to, like you're saying, showing up is a win. And so we have to build the incremental wins to be able to really make long-term change in this state. And so, that's what's going on here. And even at the party, we're trying to think of 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because that's going to be important as our young people are growing up, and they will be running for office, right? And they'll be sitting in the seats that we're sitting in right now. And so I think that work is happening, and that work is critical.
I think we're seeing, regarding critical race theory and what you're saying about critical thinking, Jamarr, we're seeing the results of 50 years of attacking the public school system. And we're starting to see now the impact of not teaching critical thinking skills. And then speaking to what Brandon said earlier regarding the city of Columbia and that campaign, and I just totally forgot what I was going to say about that. So, so my age is starting to show up. But I know the vitriol and direct mail pieces that were very negative and bringing up stuff regarding Tamika Isaac Devine. I think it might have been even her husband's business, had nothing to do with her. Same thing happened in Georgetown. That dark money coming to these racists, misconstruing information, just giving you just enough sound bites to create apathy. And I think that speaks to the lack of sophistication in many of our voters. That's why you have to keep showing up. That's why you have to get involved so you can start understanding politics, because politics is an art and a science. You just can't show up to vote. You got to get engaged. You got to be more sophisticated and demand more sophistication when it comes to your vote. Because when these dark money, dirty lies, direct mail pieces are hitting, it does impact people. And that's why I went to the city council meeting and said, you actually hurt real people. Real people are being damaged when you do stuff like that. Was that going to change the results? No, but it was serving notice that hopefully other people will start speaking up and said, we're not going to tolerate this anymore, because that just chips away at our democracy. And we are very close to losing our democracy. And I'm just going to put this out. We are actually very close to a civil war with people running around with guns and everything. I'm not living in fear. I'm living in awareness of that we are very close to losing our democracy. We are very close to civil war. And as someone did ask me the other day, I wonder how it's going to break down with this if we go into civil war. It's not just going to be north-south. I think it's going to be urban-rural, an urban-rural civil war. Brandon, I know you're looking like you want to say something, so go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead and say
Oh, no. In my head, I was like, Lord, I'm not that Democrat that's afraid of guns, because I've been trained to fire everything from a 9mm to a 50 caliber sniper rifle. And I might have something in my trunk that'll hold you if you step to me the wrong way. So I believe that Democrats, we can't take this when they go low, we go high mentality, because we've been losing on that mentality. Sometimes when they go low, we need to kick them in their faces and let them know we're not going to stand for it anymore. When they attacked Tamika Isaac Devine, when they attacked Reverend Blue, when they attacked Mayor Vernon Dunbar in New Ellington, when they attacked the council member that was running, they attacked all of these people viciously, with very little response. And when we get attacked and we don't respond, that allows their lies to fester in the minds of our voters. And what we saw in these municipal elections across South Carolina was that it ended up splitting the vote, not by Democrat, Republican, but black versus white. That is the issue that is going to cause wide range detriment across our state, specifically South Carolina, if we don't do the work to correct it. And we talked about allies earlier. We got to strengthen our allyship. We got to change our message. We have to create, I can't even say we have to change our strategy, because we do not have a strategy today. We have to form our strategy. One thing that we're doing with the South Carolina Democratic Party's Black Caucus, we are about to release the outline of our 6-year strategic plan to our membership. And then after we work it out, we'll release it to, the general South Carolina Democratic Party. But I hope that our example trickles out towards the rest of our party, so that we can start planning long term. I know that we're planning as a caucus for the next 6 years, but like I had a great conversation with Jamarr yesterday, our party needs to start planning for the next 20 and 30 years. Last story I'll tell is from when me and Jamarr were young, little up and coming politicos, trying to do our thing and change the world. And we went to this party and told them we wanted to do a long-term strategic plan for this county party. And the chair and the executive committee looked at us and said, but we have a calendar. Why do we need a strategic plan? And I'll mute myself on that.
Brandon, you so...
Sometimes, and I'm not going to say the name either, but, this is over a decade ago. I mean, I probably could say it, but we're not going to be messy today. It's on the Lord's day. We're not going to do it. But, you got a lot of people who are in leadership positions who think they know what they're doing. And one of the things I think that's important about this is, when we went and said, we were young. I mean, we were new to politics relatively. And so we didn't even know really all the elements of strategic planning. We've learned that work, over the past decade. But, at the end of the day, when, a lot of people in leadership positions want to do the bare minimum. And the bare minimum is what hurts everybody, because the bare minimum is never enough, especially for the communities of people that are at stake, right? Because it's Black and brown people that are involved in the Democratic Party. That's who's at stake here, right? And when we talk about let's just do a calendar, I don't want to do the work of having a strategic plan. You're also sending a message potentially in your leadership, whether you intend to or not. You are also sending a message to say it ain't that important to me, right? If we don't make the investment and resources and time to really build a plan that's going to be engaging of different types of people. And so I think that piece it is very off-putting, yes, when we were in that situation. But I think that we see that a lot. And that's more training, that's more leadership development, right? That's more of the showing up and building partnerships and allyship and, all the things that, we've talked about through this program. But I think that it's important because if we don't have a long-term, if at minimum 25 to 30 year plan, I think it's the communities of people that are looking for new leadership and that are looking for progressive change that are going to be the ones that suffer. Because the people who are in leadership right now don't care enough to think long-term that involves those communities. Because in Texas, for example, you can't think about the next 40 years without thinking about Black and brown people. Like I mentioned to you all, 95% of the population growth in a decade, about 5% white people. But what happened in the census, what happened in the redistricting is white communities got centered in that. And so if we're not thinking, like I said, 20, 30, 40, even 50 to some degree years, you're telling communities of color it's not important enough. And that's not a message you want to send to people. Then when we're turning around in the election and say, come vote. When we need people to testify on or against bills or redistricting or whatever, then you're telling people to testify. When we are doing public demonstrations, you're asking people to come. But in your planning and in your investment of energy, resources, and time, you are not showing that investment or interest in those communities. And so I think that is an important piece that we've got to make sure that we acknowledge.
I'm glad you said that, Jamarr. And time is, we got like 2 minutes. And we need to carry on that to our next conversation, because it's not only strategic planning within the political party that needs to be done. Our communities need to do strategic planning. Communities, we need to come together And we need, what do you want your community to look like in 30 to 40 years? Even if some of us are not here, you need to plan it for your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. That's generational wealth. Generational wealth is not just money. Generational wealth is leaving them with a legacy, a plan on how you want that community to look. So as Black folks, I'm telling y'all right now, y'all need to get together in your communities and ask the questions of, what do we want this to look at in 30, 40 years? And what will it take us to get there? Because we also too often are reactive to what happens rather than proactive to what happens. And that ends up with folks going to people who are in positions of power, and you're begging rather than telling them, this is what we want to happen, and you need to provide the resource, and so it starts on a granular community level also. And I'm putting that we really do need to start talking about strategic plans. Y'all, it is all political. It is all political. If you think this isn't about politics, it definitely is, because once again, going back to politics, is the art and science. You got to know how to influence people. You got to understand psychology, and the science is the data. And one other thing I want to say also, there's such a desperate need, and I know Jamarr and Brandon understood, for training. We need advocacy training across our communities. And I've been in meetings recently where, it's blatant, it's glaring. And I was sitting there saying they need training, because if you don't have training, you get caught up in a vicious cycle where you're talking and you see the problems and you know what's wrong, but you don't know how to take the first step to solve the problems. You don't know how to organize to work together to solve the problems. And that's just off the top of my head, the quick version, because we're wrapping up today. But as we wrap up, Brandon, last words from you and last words from Jamarr. Brandon, I'll let you go because you with the family. To everybody, we said hi, but your last words for today.
Yeah, my last words is to everybody, stay vigilant. We have to stay vigilant. We have to be aware what's going on around us. We have to continue to press forward, and don't allow any of this mess to turn you around. It's just, at the end of the day, we all we got. And if we on ourselves, we're giving up on everybody. So we just have to keep pressing forward. So thank you again, Marilyn, for hosting us this month. I hear that if we can do this in December, we may all be able to be in the same place at the same time.
Oh, so that's a good idea. Okay.
The atmosphere, that thing comes back around. But
yeah,
y'all this month.
Let's do that. We'll make it happen. Thank you, Brandon, for bringing that up. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, we're gonna do it. Consider that done, at least on my part.
Well, I will add, yes, I'll be in the state. In case, let me just let your viewers know that, so that people don't forget, I am from Charleston. So, I'll be home for the holidays, some business, but also the holidays. And I think I'll be there the 3rd. So, I mean, we've never done that before. We've been doing this, a year and a half? Show. And I remember it was during the pandemic, and we were all texting or emailing, whatever, back and forth. And we said, we just gonna get on and talk about stuff.
That's right.
And then it's turned into every month people are looking for us. And I'm glad I haven't been able to join the past couple months just because transition into a new role. But now I've got my schedule under control. So I'll be joining. But always grateful for this platform, this space, for us to talk about real issues and to keep it real with people, about the current events and what it means for our communities and what it means for people we all care about. As Brandon said, right, be vigilant. But I think at the end of the day, every action you take is a step toward progress, and I think we have to be conscious enough to understand that. And so being mindful of what actions we take and how we take them, when we take them, and how we engage other people. I think that we also need to do, as we've been talking about in this political space, more relational organizing. Don't just take action by yourself. Ask 2, 3, 5 other people. So if you're going to the city council meeting, ask a friend. if you're going to the protests or, whatever, ask, 5 friends to come with you. So, because this piece we talked about security and safety, it's good to have people with you when you do these things. If you're going to testify about redistricting, take a friend or what have you, or a family member, a coworker, a colleague or something, because they probably live in a different district or different zip code than you, right? And so you actually are expanding your own impact when you invite someone. And so I would just, in addition to everything that we've shared, is make sure that you always invite people, because it's not enough for us to be involved by ourselves. It's not enough for us to just get the information. It's also about how we disseminate and how we share information with our neighbors and our friends and other community members. And so I think that those are some important pieces. And so, always feel free to reach out to us. I think, we're all tagged on here. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, those sorts of things. And yeah, I'll be in South Carolina, so hopefully we will get to do in person. We've never done it, so we could do a whole.
That'll be fun. We gotta really kind of think about that too. Yeah, but we'll be talking before. Yeah, we might have some people join us. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah, we could do a community conversation, something like that.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm working on some stuff. We'll talk after, because everybody's got to go hop off now. But I do want to end with this: that we have got to work smarter. We work really hard, but we've got to work smarter. And all that we talk about, even coming and y'all listening and joining us on this show, I think Jamarr and Brandon would agree with me. We want people to work smarter. And that's what we're talking about. Grab somebody, tell them, meet me at the city council meeting, communicating better, create those allyships and partnerships so you're not out there by yourself. Work smarter, not harder, because we got the hard work down, but we ain't working as smart as we can work. Brandon, Jamarr, thank you for joining me this evening. We're going to get together before you get here, Jamarr, so we can work out some details. So y'all sleep on it and brainstorm, and maybe we could come up with something we can make happen. I'm glad you brought that up, Brandon. And as always, I enjoy Jamarr and Brandon being here with me, and we're going to be out, folks, but thank you everybody for joining us on A Gathering Place today on Politics Sunday, every third Sunday. Brandon, thank you. Tell the family hello. Jamarr, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Be careful out there, and tell Beto I said hi.
I will call him and tell him.
All right, y'all. Good night. I'll see you later. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Good night.